This July the 8th will mark 10 years that Dwayne Mickey passed away. And Dwayne Mickey was a founding member of this church. He was my partner, and I still miss him to this day. The piano that you have over there was Dwayne's piano. When he passed, I didn't know what to do with it. I would play piano. It would have been something I needed to dust, so I donated it to the church. And I get a lot of joy sometimes coming and just sitting and listening to somebody play the piano, and I'm glad to know that it's getting some good use out of it. 2 weeks before Dwayne passed away, he asked me if it was okay if he went home to Cincinnati. He needed to say goodbye to his father. Dwayne told his father 15 years before that he was gay and that he had AIDS. Dwayne's father never spoke to him again. And he needed to bring closure to that before he could go home. So when he asked me, we tried to get his father to come visit, but his father didn't like the gay thing. He thought that coming into our gay household would show his approval of it. And I didn't understand that, having a child myself. I didn't understand, and I still don't. So when Dwayne asked me if it was okay if he went home, all I could do was say yes and get him ready to go. And as I was getting ready to go, I was getting ready to say goodbye to him as well, because I knew he wasn't coming home. I knew that when he left here, that would be it. That would be it. So for 2 weeks, I was sat in the Cincinnati hospital with Dwayne, and I watched him and his father attempt to find some kind of reconciliation, to come to some kind of term, and to make up for that last 15 years, something that they'll never, ever get back. Dwayne asked me when I got up there to not say anything to his father. He knew that I could not understand how a father could let stupidity and pride keep him from his dying son's side. I don't. Watching these two men come to terms with their lives forced me to take another look at my life and forced me to think about my own estranged father. I had not seen my own father in 10 years, and I decided that this scene that I was watching, this dramatic bedside scene, was something I just didn't care to repeat. So when I come back to Jacksonville, I consulted with Pastor Gary about my feelings and what I was thinking and what I should do. And Pastor Gary helped me come to the conclusion that I needed to get my dad, and I needed to bring him down here, and I needed to find some way to at least be friends with the man. So let me tell you a little bit about my dad. My dad today would be called a monster. He was not a nice man. The nicest thing I ever heard anybody say about my father when I was a kid is that he was an SOB. And he lived up to that reputation, totally. Most people were afraid of him. And when I was 11 years old, my father left. I came home from school one day and he just wasn't there. And nobody bothered explaining where he was. But to be honest with you, there was a peace, a calmness without his presence. And I think that peace and calmness helped me to help me develop into a better man than I was going to become with his presence. My father, I saw him 5 times in my adult life after he left when I was 11 years old. The next time I saw him was at my high school graduation. My oldest sister decided that she was going to have a graduation party for me, and she decided to invite my father without telling me. As I was marching into my graduating class, I glanced up and I saw my sister, and I saw this guy that looked familiar to me, and he was sitting with somebody that was obviously his wife, and I was very upset that my sister thought that my dad had anything to do with my accomplishments, and I was really offended that she thought he had any business being there. So I didn't go home. I spent the night in my cap. I took my cap and gown off, kept it on my arm, and I spent the night wandering in the streets of Lexington, Kentucky, crying and trying to figure out, why was he there. I didn't speak to my dad that time. The next time I saw my dad was at my wedding. My wife insisted to save face that we invite him. I didn't want to. I didn't care to. At my wedding, he refused to. There's no pictures of my father in the wedding pictures along with the wedding party, because my father decided he didn't want to stand next to my mother to take pictures. It all of a sudden was all about him. It always was about him. And I just told my father if he could go sit down and close his mouth, that he was not going to disrespect my mother. And I didn't talk to him the whole time. That was the only thing I said to my father, is you can go sit down and I'm going to respect my mother. Disrespect my mother. The next time I saw my dad was at the birth of my child. For some reason he came in to take a look at his grandson, who was not named after him. After that, he next time I saw him was at my mother's funeral. My mother died. I called him at like 4 in the morning to let my father know that my mother had died, and his wife said to me, well, why on earth are you calling him? Why do we care? And I told her, his wife, politely, that I didn't care. I said, but you know, I have 8 brothers and sisters, and one of my sisters might find some comfort in having their father there at this time. I said, he can come if he wants to, I don't care. And he did show up for the funeral, and again, I did not speak to my father at the funeral or after the funeral. When Dwayne died, he gave me a lot of gifts, and I didn't realize how many gifts I'd gotten from him until after his passing. Recently, his dog Vera, passed away, and I had to put her down, and that made me think a lot about what he gave me, and what a great pleasure it was that I had this dog for 10 years to take care of that was his. So when I decided I was going to call my dad, I called him up on the phone out of the blue, and he was quite shocked to hear my voice. And I suggested to him that I wanted to bring him to Florida, that I wanted to get to know him, I wanted to educate him about me so he could learn something about me, because he knew nothing. He thought he knew a lot of things, but he really knew nothing. And so I've been to Tennessee, and I get my dad in the car, because there's a lot I have to talk about with him, because this 11-year-old boy is still, hurt, and there's a lot of questions this 11-year-old boy has for this man. I get my dad on the interstate, I roll up all the windows, I lock the doors, I get the car up to 80. And me and my father yelled, screamed, and cussed at each other for the next 10 hours in the car, all the way from Tennessee to Florida. When my dad and I pulled into my driveway here in Jacksonville, my dad could not wait to get out of that car. And this was a Saturday. The next day I was hosting a cookout for my father and, after church. So when we pulled in the driveway, a friend of mine, Will, was there cooking, getting ready things ready for the next day for me. And Will was one of my best friends. Will happens to be about 6'8", and black man. One of my dad's favorite words was the N-word. And I marched my father right up to my friend Will. And I told my father, I said, you use the N-word one time. When you hear it, I'm going to let this man take care of it for me. The 2 of you talked about that. My dad politely just looked up and shook Will's hand and didn't say another word. That night, the re-education of my father started that night. My son and my wife, his mother, came to dinner at my house. My father realized that everything he thought he knew about me was wrong, that he really knew nothing about me. He saw that my wife and son loved me, respected me, and that we were a very close-knit, loving family. And he realized as the evening went on how much they loved and respected Dwayne as well. And he realized that as a family and as a group that we had all lost somebody that meant something very much to us. And he got his eyes opened up pretty well. And then, when he realized that my wife loved me and cared about me, and she didn't care that I was gay or that I had, left to start this other relationship with somebody, it kind of blew him out of the water. He really didn't know what to think about it. Remember now that my dad is 82 years old at this point, so I'm trying to teach this old dog a few new tricks here. The next day, I brought my dad to Christ Church of Peace. My dad had never been in a church his entire life. His mother, who I have a picture of my 2 grandmas here. This is my mother's mother and my dad's mother. There were some really good GCBs, good Christian bells. And it was my grandmother, she tried her entire life to get her son to clean up his act and get her son to join church. And he was afraid of God. He was afraid that he was too mean, that he had done too many things to get God's forgiveness. So I brought my dad to this church. I decided that I wanted to shock my dad as much as possible. So I brought him into this church and I set him right next to chocolate. So